well, let's begin. My name is Jeremy. Welcome to the OffSec webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce today Jon. Jon is one of our student mentors. Student mentors used to be student administrators. We've changed to the new term to better reflect what it is that they actually do for you guys day in and day out. So Jon started working with OffSec about 5 years ago. We were actually student mentors together, and I'm very happy to bring him to you today. We're going to do something a little bit different. Normally, these webinars are a little bit of a Q&A style, but in this case, Jon has prepared a presentation for you. So I'm going to sit back and drink my coffee, and I'm going to let Jon take it away.
Thank you, Jeremy. Let me share my screen. Also, thank you all for coming and joining us today. Now, many of you are most likely aware that the OSCP exam was updated last January to include Active Directory. This is a good change. Knowledge of Active Directory is vital now. So the certification was updated to remain relevant and competitive in this kind of landscape. However, we do acknowledge that these changes may have caused some of you to be anxious or hesitant with taking the exam. My goal here today is to address concerns you might have with these changes. Now, I went over the questions that you submitted for this webinars, and luckily a good chunk of them will be answered with my presentation. With that being said, this will be our agenda. We'll start with going over the exam changes, then give you tips on how to prepare for the exam, and then we'll go over what to do during the exam itself. We'll also go over the exam scheduling and proctoring process, and we'll end this webinar with a Q&A. Now, normally, we don't comment or disclose details about the exam in any way. This includes how it changed over the years. But due to the magnitude of the recent changes, we believe that being transparent will help you prepare for it better. So moving forward, every exam will now only have 3 standalone machines. Each of these will require low privilege access and full administrative control. Low privilege access gives you 10 points, and escalating your privileges gives you another 10 points. That means you get 20 points per standalone machine and 60 points for all 3. Buffer overflow was downgraded to be a low privilege attack vector. So if you gain access with buffer overflow, you'll still need to escalate your privileges on the standalone machine. So what's more, buffer overflow is no longer guaranteed to be on every exam. So instead, every exam now has an AD set in its place. Now, the Active Directory set has 2 client machines and 1 domain controller. Now, all 3 machines give you 40 points. However, unlike standalone machines, you must complete all 3 machines in the Active Directory challenge to obtain points. No partial points are awarded. And finally, the last change worth going over is the increase of bonus points from 5 points to 10 points. We increased the bonus points because data shows students who spend more time in the labs have a higher chance in passing the exam. By increasing the bonus points, we hope to motivate you to complete the lab report and exercises, and hopefully spend your time in the labs more effectively. Now, I'm not going to go over the bonus points requirements because they are outlined in the OSCP exam guide. However, there are a few things that I want to go over. Since the exam focuses on Active Directory now, the bonus points requirements will also be updated to match this. Now, after March 14 this year, your lab report must also include the full exploitation of an Active Directory set in the labs. It shouldn't really be an issue, as I would highly recommend exploiting the AD sets in the labs anyway when preparing for the exam. And given these changes, we have identified 2 possible approaches you guys can take. The first approach involves attempting Active Directory. This approach offers the most flexibility, since if you succeed, you're guaranteed 40 points. You'll have several options on how to get the remaining 30 points as shown in the slides. Attempting AD shows that you're confident in the topic. Now, as I mentioned, AD is crucial now, but more importantly, attempting the AD challenge means you have a good idea on what to expect for the exam. Keep in mind, everything you need to know about AD is covered in the course and labs. And if you succeed with the Active Directory set, you will also not need to do as many standalone machines. Now, as you can imagine, the possible attack vectors of a standalone machine can be very broad. So all of these factors greatly reduce the uncertainty of how your exam will go. Personally, I'll take this approach as not only is it beneficial for my growth, but in my opinion, the benefits outweigh the risks. Now, if you really don't want to do AD, it is possible, but you have to root all standalone machines. This will give you 60 points. And to pass, you'll need to submit your lab report and exercises. That will give you the remaining 10 points you need. Now, this is a valid approach and might feel similar to the old exam. Personally, I wouldn't do this as it leaves no room for errors, and avoiding any topic you're not comfortable with greatly limits you, in my opinion. So with that, we've gone over everything that changed during the exam. Now, a lot of you were asking, how do you prepare for the exam? How do you know if you're ready, or what exactly do you need to do? Now, I'm going to share with you how I would personally prepare for the exam if I were someone new or a new student. Since a lot of you seem to be new as well, my advice will be tailored for those who are just starting out. However, some of the resources or references I included might still be helpful for those who have experience. So the start of our journey is the tried and true method of finishing the course materials and exercises. It's pretty straightforward. Once you finish the PDOs and the PDF and video of a module, you do the exercises for that module. If you want, you can keep practicing the exercise on as many lab machines as you want till you're comfortable with the topic. Now, what Jim actually suggests, so you can use your time more optimally, is, for example, after finishing the Nmap module, you can scan as many lab machines as time permits and save the outputs. This allows you to take your time, get comfortable with the module, but it also gives you notes that will be helpful once you start working on the labs. And while traditional exercises are the only exercises needed for bonus points, I would highly suggest checking the different kinds of exercises provided in the course. Specifically, we have recently announced the release of topic exercises. If you have not heard about them, I included a link of the announcements in the slides. Now, I suggest completing these as well, as they do offer different benefits. Unlike traditional exercises, topic exercises are interactive. You can verify your answers if they're correct. This is really helpful when you're just starting out. And aside from this, generally, the more practice you get, the better. As for extra miles, it's up to you if you want to do them. They do require concepts and techniques outside the course, outside the scope of the course, and they do take a lot of time. So if you do have that time, they can be a fulfilling challenge to overcome. After completing the exercises, you can finally start working on the labs. I'll go more into this in a bit, but for now, I want to address a trend I noticed that's pretty common among students. Now, when mentoring students, I noticed that a lot of them would often skip doing the materials and start working on the labs. I can understand where they're coming from. Lab time is limited. And if you're new, it might take a while to finish the materials. But I will reassure you it's worth it, as when you're starting out, it's really important that you build a solid foundation. And I want you guys to understand that you're not wasting lab time if you're still going through the course. You won't be exploiting the lab machines, but you should be spending a lot of time with your assigned machines. Assigned machines, true, aren't as exciting as or mysterious as lab machines, but you do have full access to them. So how does that help you? Now, a lot of you were asking how you should prepare for AD. In case you're not aware, the assigned machines are mini AD environment. Not only will this help you practice AD enumeration and exploitation, you can take this a step further by using your full access to examine how AD was configured. So this will give you an admin's point of view into the system and to in Active Directory. just remember that the more knowledgeable you are with the application you're exploiting, the more effective you'll be in attacking it. Another method I like to use to understand AD is to experiment with the AD settings. So I add users to my assigned machines, for example, or change the configuration. And then I'll just check how my enumeration, or how this affects my enumeration and attacks. Now I find this approach extremely educational to get familiar with any software. And you can try this method on any module, not just AD. If you're still not convinced to take the time to go through the materials, going through the course as intended will give you part of the bonus points requirements if you do the exercises. So in my opinion, going through the course is really time well spent. With that out of the way, we can finally discuss how to go through the labs. Even after completing the materials, a lot of students would have difficulties exploiting machines. Now, the labs can be a bit overwhelming. When I was taking the course, it took me days to get my first machine. So to help address this, we created the learning path document. This document is our guide on what you can work on first, what machines you should work on first. There's a walkthrough for alpha and beta, and hints for another 9 machines. You should use the walkthroughs as a guideline to build your methodology, and then you can improve your methodology with the 9 remaining lab machines with hints. Now, after finishing the learning path machines, you should have the knowledge and confidence needed to continue working on the remaining lab machines. So now, as you continue exploiting machines in the labs, you should be on the lookout for the machines that are part of an AD domain. The labs currently have 2 AD sets, so you should find and exploit them. I can't tell you which machines they are, so don't forget to do post-exploitation on the machines that you root. You need to look for information such as if they contain information on other lab machines or if they're part of a domain. It's really important you find them so you can practice for your exam. You can also use the AD sets that's available to you to practice a variety of tools related to AD. Now, don't limit yourself on a specific tool. Just for example, if you like using Mimikatz, practice PowerView and vice versa. You'll never know what kinds of restrictions you'll face during the exam, so it's a good idea to have several tools available and be aware of their advantages and disadvantages so you can use the more optimal tool in a given situation. Now, after completing the AD set, all that's really left to do is to continue practicing. A lot of you ask, how do you know if you're ready? Or how many machines you should exploit? How much time you should spend on the labs, etc. Now, personally, the time you'll need to dedicate preparing for the exam will vary depending on your background knowledge. That's why, rather than time, I personally prefer using the number of exploited machines as a metric to gauge yourself. Prior to the exam update, I would usually say that completing the machines in the public network would be sufficient to try the exam. But with the addition of Active Directory, pivoting may be needed depending on the AD configuration. So with that being said, I suggest completing all machines in the public network and exploit machines in the different departments, IT, Dev, or Admin, till you are comfortable with pivoting in a minimum. So the more you exploit, the better. Now, another reason that I prefer using the number of lab machines is because our data has shown that students who do more lab machines have a higher chance of passing the exam. This is expected. The more systems you exploit, the more experience you gain, the easier it will be for you to adapt. Now, while this data is not up to date to the recent exam changes, I believe it will follow the same trend, as this trend is consistent for as long as I remember. And while I recommend routing as many machines as possible, it's important that you do not rely on hints in the forums or ask for walkthroughs to get a high number of machines. The number of machines you exploit will not matter if you're spoon-fed the answers. The labs were designed for you to figure out how to solve problems. So it's because of this that we actually limit the amount of walkthroughs we provide. And just because you root a machine doesn't mean that there's something more to learn from it. Some machines have more than one vulnerability. If you've already rooted a machine, you're free to use your access to check for other vulnerabilities. Or if you want the extra challenge, you can do another black box test. Now, once you feel that you prepared enough, I'd suggest simulating an actual exam. So what this means is exploiting 3 standalone machines and an AD set within 24 hours. When selecting the machines you will use, try to select machines you've not worked on first. If you've worked diligently in the labs, this can be difficult, especially since there's only 2 AD sets. Feel free to select a machine or AD set that you have worked on, but had a hard time with if there's no more available. If you completed the machine, don't look at your notes. We want this to be as close to the real thing as possible. Now, some of you ask if you can use the PG environment to prepare for the exam. Now, you can use the PG machines as a supplementary preparation. However, since PWK labs have been specifically designed to prepare you for OSCP and real-world pen testing, I still recommend primarily using PWK for preparing in the exam. And this exercise will take 24 hours, so some of you may be unable to commit that much time or energy. An alternative would be to split the 24 hours into multiple days. For example, 4 hours a day for 4 days. This gives you 16 hours. I deducted the 8 hours because you're expected to sleep within the 24 hours. But whatever the case, what's important is you put yourself in a situation where you have to attack a set of machines with time constraints. The goal of this exercise is to train yourself to keep calm under time pressure and improve your time management skills. Now, time management is honestly one of the more difficult aspects of a pen test for me. Personally, I'd rather just spend as much time as possible to root a machine or solve a problem, but we can't just do what we want. We need to be efficient and deliver the best results with the time given to us. So, while I'm not good with time management, I hope that these tips can be a good starting point for you. Now, the most important rule for me personally would be to specify a time limit per machine. So for example, you can rotate machines every 2 to 3 hours. If you manage to access the machine in that time, allot another 2 hours for privilege escalation. If you don't, just move on. It's so easy to get lost in troubleshooting that it's really important that you're strict with yourself in order to manage your time. And as counterintuitive as it sounds, moving on to a different machine or taking a break might actually help you solve your problems. Taking a step back might help you reset your brain, allow you to approach the machine from a fresh perspective. And another thing that to be wary of during the exam is that it's pretty common for students to panic and overwork themselves. People get anxious or pressured when they see that the exam is 24 hours long. Now, as Jim always reminds students, the exam is 24 hours not because you need the whole 24 hours to finish it, but it's to allow you guys to manage your time as you see fit. You're expected to eat, to sleep, and take breaks during this time. One thing I would suggest, so you guys avoid overexerting yourself, would be to schedule time for eating and rest. You can set alarms so you won't forget to take breaks during that time. Now, in addition to that, I normally take another short 5 to 10 minute break every time I finish a machine, or I use up a 2 to 3 hour machine cycle. Now, I just do this so I can reset my brain. I can assure you that's not bad to take breaks during the exam. If you've been diligent in your exam preparation, you should have more than enough time to finish the exam. Now, once you're done with the 24-hour exam simulation, you can take your exam experience a step further and practice writing a report as outlined in the OSCP exam guide. I know a lot of people see reporting as the least interesting part of a pen test, but you have to understand that the report is the product that you will deliver to your clients. So aside from good technical skills, if the better you are at writing reports, the more successful you're likely to be. This is why the exam puts a lot of emphasis in your report. For those who ask, yes, the report has to be in English. However, we do understand that not all our students are native English speakers. So what you can do instead would be to use screenshots if you struggle to verbally explain the steps. So whatever method you use, just make sure that your report is organized, coherent, and just make sure that the reader can recreate the steps and results. Now, writing a report will also help you get familiar with the reporting requirements for the exam. Now, this is important so you won't keep checking the OSCP exam guide on the day of your exam itself. This can be time consuming and you might miss some of the reporting requirements if you do it this way. Now, if you have no experience in writing a report or you don't know or not sure where to start, we have an updated template for the lab report and exam report. I included a link in the slides, and the templates will show you the different sections your report should contain, and they also have sample documentation which should help you get started. So this method of simulating an exam can be time consuming, but it will condition you on how an actual exam feels like. It's also time well spent, as the reports you write during these mock exams can be reused for your lab report. Again, working towards the 10 bonus points. So with that, we've finished the OSCP preparation guide. We'll now go over some tips which I personally think will be helpful for you during your exam. Once your exam starts, the first thing you should do is go over your control panel. It will give you a general layout of the exam machines, and it might contain details such as if you were assigned a buffer overflow machine, or give you an idea on how your AD set is structured. So you can use this information to plan the order at which you'll do the machines, and you might also be able to decide how much time you will allocate per exam machine. Now, once you've read the objectives, it's time to start enumerating. I have a lot to say about enumeration, since I think this is where most students struggle with. Personally, what I like to do is to start with light scans on common ports such as HTTP. The reason being is I want to start manual enumeration while on these ports while more thorough scans run in the background. When it comes to running scans, I'm a bit paranoid, especially since it's done through a VPN. I don't do multiple heavy scans at once. For example, I only do one thorough Nmap scan at a time, since there's not many lab machines anyway. And if you do like running multiple scans, just make sure they don't step on each other. Now, what I mean by this is, for example, if you're running a web directory scan while also running a brute force scan, your brute force scan may lock you out of the web app, causing your directory scan to fail. So just some things to keep in mind. Now, other things to keep in mind would be vulnerability scans actually test exploits on the target. So this might leave your target unstable or the service unstable. Just be sure to revert the machine if you do run such scans, and be aware that these can happen. And one thing I learned during my own exam attempt is double checking your scans or double checking your results. During my exam, there was one machine that I couldn't find a starting point on, so I just gave up on it when I had enough points. It wasn't until I started working here when I realized my scans incorrectly labeled the port as closed. I thought I was pretty careful with my scans, so when I get results, I rarely repeat them. But it's better to be safe, since they can be inaccurate. And any port you miss is really crucial here. Take the time to rerun scans. You can even use different tools to verify your results. And to avoid wasting time repeating scans or waiting for them to finish, you can repeat them while doing manual enumeration or investigating exploits. If the scan or tool you're running or repeating is really invasive, you can repeat it while working on a different machine. Lastly, I would suggest doing a revert before repeating any scans, just so you can be more confident with the results. Now, something often overlooked during enumeration is forgetting that it's a cyclical process. So whenever you get access on a machine or a web app, enumeration doesn't end there. You will have new privileges that you previously didn't have. You're going to have access to files or be able to run commands you previously couldn't do. Each time you get access or new privileges, you have to do enumeration again in the context of these privileges. Now, this is just something to keep in mind on, as we sometimes forget this when we're in a rush. Once we're done identifying the services available to us, we start fingerprinting for exploits or vulnerabilities. Before running exploits, it goes without saying, read them, read their manual, the help command, or even the source code itself, just to understand what it does and how it does it. It's important because exploits won't work straight out of the box. Not all exploits do all the work for you. Some might need you to create a directory prior to running the exploit. Some might have been built for a specific version, and you'll need to make some changes. Whatever the case, when exploits don't work, try dissecting why it failed. Some exploits can be overwhelming, since they can be really large or have multiple steps. So what you can try is to manually follow the steps one step at a time to determine which specific part fails. Now, doing this is especially easy with web apps or web exploits, since the steps are a lot easier to replicate or manually follow. And just because one exploit does not work, does not necessarily mean that the application is patched for that vulnerability. Exploits often have different implementations, and if one does not work, try other similar exploits in case they're more compatible. Now, many of you actually asked how to attack the AD set in the exams. Now, if you feel intimidated or overwhelmed with starting the Active Directory set, I want to reassure you that initial enumeration and exploitation to AD is the same, really similar to standalone machines. The difference really starts once you have access to the domain. So until then, you'll still need to perform the same enumeration to find your initial foothold. You're going to have to scan the AD set for a bit, and it should become evident which machine is the domain controller, which are the client machines, and you might also have an idea on which machine is your initial target. Since there are a lot of commands involved when dealing with AD, you should have to try a structured approach. So I'd highly suggest preparing a checklist, such as the one included in the slides. Sorry about that. I didn't notice that the slide went past. So I would highly suggest preparing a checklist of commands, such as the one included in the slides. It should help to keep track of what you tried and what information you need. And finally, just because it is an AD set does not mean that you'll ignore non-AD services. Be as thorough as possible so you'll have a solid grasp on how the machines work. This will give you a broad set of options on how to move forward. And while doing the exam, be thorough in documenting whatever you've done. You don't want to waste time rerunning commands because you discarded information you thought was irrelevant. To save time, I actually use tools like terminal loggers. They automatically save everything I do. And just to be safe, I would also regularly take snapshots of my VM. Now, the likelihood of you accidentally deleting important files or crashing your own machine is really low, but speaking from experience, it can happen. And in high stakes situation like the exam, it would be really nice to be extra careful. Other things you can try is store your notes in your host machine. I personally like to have my notes in the VM since I use different VMs for different tasks. It helps me keep organized, but I'd suggest you guys find what works best for you. Just be sure that you have backups and documentation. Now, with that, we have finished all the exam preparation and tips. The remaining part of this webinar will be going over the process on exam scheduling and proctoring. Also give some advice on how you can stay calm during the exam itself. When scheduling your exam, just keep in mind that our exam rooms fill very fast. So you might want to schedule it weeks in advance, especially if you plan on doing it on a weekend. Now, I've included the reschedule policies in the slides. Make sure to plan your schedule well because your exam will be canceled if you don't show up within 1 hour of your exam start time. Here is a short demo on how to schedule your exam. This is from the OffSec portal. It's pretty straightforward, and this demo is part of our help center if you want to view it again. Now, I'll give you a few moments to go over the demo. After scheduling your exam, you will receive the exam confirmation email. Don't ignore this email. It contains information on how to log into the proctoring tool, the proctoring rules, the requirements, and etc. And it's just a few days left before the exam. I usually take it easy and avoid being stressed. I want to be healthy and well rested, just so I would avoid any last minute procrastination. Instead, I'd use the last few days preparing logistics, such as food and the venue. It would be a good idea to have a backup internet connection during the exam. If having multiple connections is not feasible, what you can do instead is maybe prepare mobile data. We don't recommend using mobile data as your primary connection to the exam, as it can be unreliable. But if your main connection goes down, having mobile data might just allow you to continue working. Another thing to consider would be getting your backup connection from a different ISP, just so issues from one ISP does not affect all your connections. Now, once your logistics are ready, I'd suggest preparing for the proctoring process. There are technical requirements in order to participate in the proctored exam. I included the Help Center article that outlines these requirements. Please check if your setup meets them. I'll also stress that if you're using allowed Linux OS like Debian, Ubuntu, or Kali, please make sure to schedule a test session. You can do so by submitting a ticket to our proctoring team. Make sure everything is working correctly, basically, before exam day, since you really don't want to spend time troubleshooting during the exam itself. You also need to prepare a government-issued ID for the verification process. I highly recommend scanning your ID just in case your webcam can't show your ID clearly. And once all of that is ready, really just mentally prepare yourself. When I take exams, I usually try to condition myself to be confident with the preparation I did, keep repeating that I'm ready, and I just find that I stay calm if I believe in myself. But if you can't help being anxious or worried, just try to do other activities, go out for a walk, work out, maybe eat out, really anything that you can do to take your mind out of the exam. It's important that you don't stress out during this time. So just keep yourself healthy and well rested. And with that, finally, what happens during the exam itself? We can start the proctoring process 15 minutes prior to the exam. This is what the login screen looks like. Your credentials will be provided in the exam confirmation email I mentioned earlier. So don't use your VPN credentials for logging in, they won't work. While attempting the exam, now when attempting the exam, even though we mentally prepared ourselves, there are times we lose our nerves when things don't go as planned. When I took the exam, I was really confident at the start. I spent a lot of time in the labs. I got most of the machines, and I thought I was as ready as I'll ever be. Now, I got 3 machines fairly quickly at the start, and after that, I only needed 1 more to pass with plenty of time. However, things didn't go so well with the last 2 machines. As you know, I missed 1 port on 1 machine while I wasn't connecting the dots on the latter. So hours went by. I kept cycling over the 2 machines, and that's when I started feeling fatigued, depressed. My mind was constantly thinking thoughts like, it was a good attempt, and maybe I can do this again in my second attempt. Basically, I got more and more distracted since my mind was thinking of what to do since I'm gonna fail. Now, I wasn't going anywhere. I decided to take a break, calm myself down. So I went outside, got some fresh air, empty my mind. And after around 30 minutes, I went back to my room and, look at all the information from the top. Now that I was focused and somewhat rested, it was easier for me to connect the dots. And an hour later, I got root on another machine. Decided to let the last machine go since I wanted to use the time left to double check my documentation. Now, different people have different ways of handling cases like this. Personally, I like going out, taking a break. Others might play games, take a nap, some meditate. But really, just do any activity that relaxes you and that stops you from panicking. And to end this slide, I just want you guys to know that you shouldn't feel too bad if you don't pass the exam. The exam can be really difficult. And a lot of students and SAs actually, or SMs now, actually attempt this exam just to get a feel of what it's like, assess what they need to improve on, and passing may just be a secondary goal for them. Also, I don't consider a failed attempt as a waste of time. I actually failed my first OSCE attempt, but failing the exam did help me identify what I needed to improve on. So whether you pass or not, I believe there's value in going over the experience. Now, when you finish your exam, I don't go to sleep immediately. I made sure all the proofs were submitted, and I double checked my screenshots and documentation. Every time I root the machine, I actually rebirth it and redo every steps in my notes just to make sure they're correct. This also allows me to root the machine again and double check my proof files. Now, this can be time consuming and take time away from working on other machines. What you can do instead is to do this at the end of your exam with the time you have left. But once you're sure that everything is in order, you can finally end your exam. Now, luckily, I didn't encounter any issues during my exam, whether it be with the internet or the labs. However, if you do experience issues, please contact us immediately. We have a contact protocol. Now, we won't help with the exam objectives, but we will help you with technical issues just with the VPN and labs. We know full well the stress you guys are experiencing, so we take exam concerns very seriously, and we will do our best to assist you. We also work very hard to make sure that our exam environments are working properly. So I can assure you it's rare if something goes wrong. But if you do believe that the exam machine is not working properly, even after a revert, we can test the machine for you. Now, with that, we are done with the exam. But it's not yet time to celebrate. You still need to get rest because you still need to write your exam report. So after the report, you have 24 hours to write it and submit it to us. Now, I'd highly suggest taking a break or getting some sleep if you finish the exam late at night like I did. Now, I don't like writing detailed reports when I'm tired or fatigued. I'm more likely to make mistakes that way. So just make sure to get a bit of break. Now, as I mentioned, the report is really important, and you should make sure that it's written professionally. Now, I'll repeat, we consider a report good if the reader can recreate your steps and results. After archiving your report, I would suggest to be thorough in checking it. I remember I extracted my PDF and read it page by page just to make sure it was properly converted and was not missing an information. The report submission instructions can be found in the OSCP exam guide. To upload your report, you'll need to log into the upload page. Now, the credentials can also be found in the exam confirmation email I mentioned earlier. Lastly, it's unlikely your report will go past the upload size limit, but for your reference, the maximum size of the archive is 300 MB, while the PDF is 400 MB. The information is also available in the upload page. And once you're sure that your archive is correct, calculate the MD5 hash. The reason being is when you upload your report, the system prints out the MD5 hash of the uploaded file. So you can check if the upload was successful, if the MD5 hash matches. If not, you'll have to re-upload your report. Now, with that, we're done with everything related to the exam. Finally, here are the links I used during the presentation. Please do go over them when preparing for your exam. Also know that we have a lot of emails. Can get confusing figuring out who to contact for what. So I hope this table can help you with that. And with this, I will end my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. We'll start answering questions you have. For those that we won't be able to go over, please check our Help Center articles in case it was answered in our facts. And if not, feel free to reach out to us to the emails I provided or in Discord.
All right, thank you so much, Jon. That was excellent. We have a lot of questions that came in. There are, let's say, 3 classes of the questions. I think most asked question is, will this presentation be recorded? Yes, it will. You will get an email with a copy of it. So no worries about that. All the webinars are always recorded. The second class of questions is about rules. I'm going to try to avoid those questions right now, just because they're easily answered via email. And that way we can get to the more normative questions about how to do things, what we think about things, and we can get Jon's expert opinion on a lot of these items. So we're not going to get through everything. Please reach out in Discord if you want to continue the conversation. We're happy to continue chatting with you there. So let's jump right in. Jon, I'm going to read these mostly verbatim, and then let you give your take, and maybe I'll give my own too. All right. So, can you use tools that you have written yourself, and do you need to prove you wrote them in some way? For example, should you send a GitHub link?
Personally, I don't think you need to prove you written themselves. What's important is that you can give the tool the source code of the tool, and that the essays can recreate, or the SMs can recreate your how you use the tool.
It's gonna get hard getting used to that acronym after 5 years, huh?
I know.
All right, next one is it okay to take a blue team position, for example, a tier 2 SOC position, for the sake of getting experience, and then after a few years advance to the red team? Or should I strive to get the knowledge on various jobs, such as network administrator, system administrator, and then find a red team position? Jon, what do you think?
Personally, I think knowledge on blue team is really helpful, and vice versa. Whatever you're doing, the more you know, the better, but it does take time. So it's really just balancing, in my opinion, being able to balance how much time you're going to spend on a specific field, right? What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think I'd say pretty much the same thing. If your choice is between the blue team and sort of a regular IT job, both of them are going to be security related, especially if you're already thinking about going into pen testing. Then you'll be thinking about things with that orientation in mind. That said, really everything that you do, and I think we've said this before many times, but everything that you do professionally is going to lead to the culmination of your skills and experiences and you will take that with you into red teaming. So I don't think that there's really a wrong answer. It's more, what are you interested in and what can you see yourself spending time on? Jon, what do we mean when we say that the lab machines must be unique in the lab report in order to get the 10 points?
So basically the exploits have to be unique. For example, you can't just keep reusing Eternal Blue, for example, or stuff like that. It has to be basically the vulnerability has to be different. Does that answer the question, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, you have to have 10 unique exploits for 10 unique machines. Next one here. This is a good one. I struggle with initial footholds and privilege escalation on Windows. I've gone through the OSCP and the PWK PDF, and I'm considering purchasing additional lab time, but I want to make sure I've used all the free resources first. Do you have recommendations for free resources to practice initial footholds and PE for Windows? And Jon, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty to extend the question for you. What suggestions in general do you have for somebody who is struggling with Windows in particular?
That is actually a good question. Personally, Windows was also an area I struggled in. And I honestly just kept attacking Windows machines in the labs. But with regards to free resources, there may be many machines that's available online. You can try searching for them, or maybe build your own machines and based on the exploits that you find online. That's really all I have. Maybe look at blog posts as well. I know Milk has a privilege escalation guide for Windows. Do you have anything to add, Jeremy?
Just that Microsoft has an excellent website with all sorts of information about the OS, about how things are set up, about different terms and items that they're using. It's a boring answer, but it's an important one. Don't neglect what they put out there because they are, after all, the experts. So check that out. Other than that, I think it is just a matter of getting familiar with the architecture. It is different than Linux. It's less intuitive sometimes. So as Jon said, just expose yourself to it and keep hacking away at those machines. Next one here. If a buffer overflow is included on the exam, is there a debugging machine provided?
What are we?
I think yes, there is.
Okay then. Yes, debugger will be available for you.
Okay, how do you identify Active Directory machines in the lab environment? So not the exam, in the actual PWK labs, how do you know if a machine is Active Directory related?
Good question. So as I mentioned earlier, Active Directory hacking really starts off the same as standalone machines. It's only when you get access to this that you need to do enumeration if it's part of a domain. And that enumeration is included in the course material. So just be sure to do post-exploitation steps, etc. And you should have your answer.
All right, next one here. I think I'll take this one myself. I spent quite a bit of time troubleshooting information in the materials, and it's changed to the latest version of Kali. For example, bash is mentioned in the material, but ZSH is currently the default shell. Is OffSec going to update the material to reflect that change? Yes, we will. We are always trying to update our material, especially now with the OffSec training library. We have the capacity to do that, which we didn't have before. So definitely there will be updates coming to PWK and to everything else in there. Can an individual with no prior knowledge or experience in Python or bash scripting be able to complete the OSCP? And actually, I want to combine this question with the next one, which is, I'm willing to put in the dedication, but I'm a bit scared specifically with the programming. What level of programming in Python and bash scripting does an individual require?
Honestly, the course doesn't need that much high level programming. You can, most of the scripts provided in materials can be easily understood, and you can search the remaining parts if there's still parts that aren't clear. Now, yes, we do, working knowledge in them will be helpful. And if you don't know, I honestly think that it's something that you can practice on. This might take time, but it is still doable. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, first of all, I want to commend the asker on noticing that they use the word scared, that they're concerned about the programming. It's always good to make sure that you have an awareness of where your strong points and your weaker points are. My take on programming is that the knowledge, the way that you can think about programming is the same as you think about hacking. If you're thinking about attacking a machine, in order to really understand why the attack you're using works, you have to know the machine. You have to realize that, hey, this has a service running, and that service is vulnerable to a buffer overflow, and a buffer overflow works like this because of that. You need to know that. You can, of course, execute scripts against a machine and get a shell and not know why it worked, but that's certainly not going to take you very far. So the same mindset I would apply to programming. If you are having trouble reading a program or figuring out, hey, how do I turn this loop into a function? You're encountering the same type of problem as if you just executed a script and didn't know what it did. Always try to break down problems into parts. That goes for hacking, it goes for programming, it goes for pretty much any problem solving. If you have a really big program that you're trying to make, one very well-advised way of doing that is to try to break it down into different parts of the program so that you're not trying to do everything at once. For example, if you want to build, I don't know, something like a calculator, don't try to just build a calculator. That's hard. Instead, make a function that can do addition, and make one that can do subtraction. And once you have all that together, then you'll be able to piece it together and make your pretty nifty web UI calculator. I think that's my take on that. Okay, what do we have access to during the exam? If we've taken personal notes during preparation, can we use those? Will we have internet access, and are we allowed to use Google?
Okay, so actually, yes, you are. You're allowed. The exam is an open book exam. You can use your notes. You can use Google. You can check your PDF. It's perfectly okay.
All right, next one. Is screen recording allowed during the exam?
That I am no longer sure, actually. Do you know, Jeremy?
I don't offhand. I suggest reaching out to Challenges, and they'll be able to answer that question for you. challenges@offensivesecurity.com.
No, I can confirm that screen recording is not allowed.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, screen recording is not allowed during the exam. Mark is one of our SM managers. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, this is an interesting question. I haven't heard this asked before. So Mark, we might want you to stay on the line to answer this for us. If we need to crack a hash, may we use a cloud instance with a strong GPU, for instance, a Linux machine on AWS? I'll give my take, but Mark, I'll let you confirm if I'm right or not. I don't think that there's any restriction on that, because if you have the hash, you can do with it whatever you want. But Mark, I don't know, is there any restriction there?
To put into perspective, if we're going to provide you something to crack, it's not going to take hours and hours to crack something. If you are going to use something else, if you do want to crack it, as long as it's being recorded on the host machine, where the proctoring software is running, then it will be fine.
Yeah, very good answer. And I'll reiterate that. I think lots of times students will get a hash and it'll go on for hours and they wonder, hey, am I doing this right? If you're not doing it within, we used to give a ballpark of 30 minutes. I don't know if that's still the, yeah. So if you're not cracking in 30 minutes, then it's either not the vector or you're not using the right word list. Okay, the next question I have a little bit of a bone to pick, so I'm gonna take it, and then Jon and Mark, if you wanna jump in and go right ahead. Why is the Metasploit framework still not allowed despite you changing the structure of the OSCP exam? Hacking is a game with rules only for the defending team. So good question. I think asking about why Metasploit is or isn't allowed is a good one. But I want to comment on this last one here, this last piece. Hacking is not a game where the rules only apply for the defending team. If you are engaged as a penetration tester, you have rules of engagement that you must follow, or else you'll be doing something illegal. PWK and all our offensive courseware is designed for professionals who are intending to take this into legal and well-sanctioned environments. And so learning to follow the rules, whatever they happen to be, is itself a really important part of the process. That's why we have so many rules associated with the exam. They might seem arbitrary, but part of that is to replicate having a real engagement with a real client who has said, hey, you can target this IP range, but you can't target that IP range. That's something that you have to follow. As for Metasploit itself, one of the reasons for that is that there are a lot of exploits available through Metasploit, and we want to make sure that students actually understand what it is that they are executing. Jon, Mark, what do you guys think about that one?
So yeah, you pretty much nailed it with the rules part. Yes, the exam was made with the intention of you showing that you actually understand what you're doing and not just running Metasploit. Metasploit, as you know, can make things a lot easier, and it may automate a lot of things in the background. So we want to show, or we want you guys to show, that you actually understand the steps involved in the exploitation process. And that's why we prefer you guys to do the exploits manually.
Well said.
If I can just add to that.
Please.
Also, exactly like Jeremy mentioned, that usually on a pen test, well, not usually, always you have rules of engagement. As a penetration tester, you don't just want to fire off Metasploit and fire off exploits. You could be working on production machines, you could be taking down machines that could cause issues for the company. So you really need to understand what you are doing and not just firing blindly on the penetration test. So this is why we want you to try and understand exactly what you are doing and not just firing off exploits.
Yeah, well said, Mark. There are a lot of questions which we won't have time to get to about exam restrictions. Sorry, let me close all that up. Sorry for those notifications. A lot of questions about exam restrictions, which we won't get to today. Please do email challenges@offensivesecurity.com if you have questions about what tools are and not allowed. In general, we try to be fairly general about what is and isn't allowed. If you are performing an exploit that can be, if you are running a tool that can both discover and exploit something at the same time, generally that is not allowed. Please look at the exam guide for additional information on that one. Jon, I do want to ask you one last question before we close out for the day. I have some experience in cybersecurity, but not core to pen testing. Do I need to prepare anything before taking PWK, or should I just jump directly in?
Now, if you already have experience in cybersecurity, the basic or the prerequisites of PWK has always just been Windows and Linux usage and basic idea on scripting. So if you have those, you should be good. But if you're really worried, you can, we have fundamental courses you can try out, but if you already have experience, honestly, I'd just say go for it.
Go for it. Let's end on that note. Jon, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was very valuable and helpful to many of our students. Thank you to all the marketing and student mentors who are around answering questions. And join us on Discord. We have a Discord server with plenty of students starting and continuing many conversations. So if you have questions for Jon or for Mark or for me or for anyone else, please do feel free to join and reach out. Thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.